Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rutherford Sports Network podcast, and we've got a doozy for you today. We're going to talk about an incident that happened on earlier this week, as a matter of fact. I can't remember the exact day, but the Washington Capitals' Tom Wilson, who is not exactly new to controversial incidents on the ice, had a little incident the other day. Let's take a listen to it. Now here it comes, the back behind. And there goes the punch. Buchnevich gets punched by, while he's lying down on the ice, by Tom Wilson. And then there's the incident which should have got him suspended probably for the rest of the season, where he tosses down the other Rangers player. I'm not as up to hockey as I used to be, sad to say. Panarin, of course, is the one that gets basically thrown down, pulled down, yanked down by his hair to the ice. Wilson should have gotten suspended for that. Okay, let's talk about this incident. Buchnevich got the cheap shot. He was lying prone on the ice beside the goal, and Wilson gives him the cheap shot. And let's keep going. I'll go back. Now, let's see what happens. So he got Wilson 43. Yeah, there's the cheap shot right there. Strom jumps in to protect his teammate. All right, Panarin goes in and gets in a fight with Wilson. Panarin is the superstar right now for the Rangers. And, yeah, this was not fun to watch because as we go on with this, let me turn it down just a hair. Now Buchnevich falls down, and Wilson goes on top of him and then gives him the old cheap shot to the head. A couple of shots to the head. Then Strom jumps in to pull him off. And then the Caps player falls on him. And then Panarin jumps in to take off Wilson, to pull off Wilson. And then Panarin trying to pull him off. Wilson just ragdolls him. All right. For this very brutal act, a man who's been suspended multiple times by the NHL got a $5,000 fine. $5,000. Okay. You took Panarin out for the rest of the season. The Rangers are not making the playoffs. I'll get to that in just a moment because there's a story about that. Then you have what happened on Wednesday night, which I need to cue it up, which was a good old-fashioned line brawl. There's David Quinn, the head coach, and here we go. This is what happens when you have the players do what the league should do. And there's a good old-fashioned line brawl. 3 fights simultaneously, as Kenny Albert says. Oh, yes. This is why the league should have stepped in and at least given him a 1-game suspension, or at least should have done more than that, in my opinion, but yeah, I remember that right there, what he just mentioned. And of course, Zdeno Chara tapping his teammates with his stick in approval of what happened. Slow talk. Ref is like getting out of the way. Oh my goodness. Defensemen don't get involved. They keep each other in check. And we're gonna play this through until Tom Wilson shows up on the ice for his first shift of the night. And then I'll talk more about what happened because, yeah, this is what happens when the league doesn't do its job to protect the players. They have the Office of Player Safety. Well, it didn't do a good job. Let's jump ahead a little bit. All right. Now Tom Wilson will be showing up here in just a moment. Here he comes. And, nope, that's not him. Sorry. Thought that was him. Oh, there he goes. And there he goes. Here we go. All right. Okay. Let me turn that off. All right. Before I continue on, I'm going to make sure I get the Rangers tweet that I'm going to talk about here in just a minute. New York Rangers. All right, I'm going to talk about this in just a moment. I need to follow them. Let's see. Where is that? Where is that tweet? Do they still have it up? I need to find it. Okay. All right. All right. I hate when they do this. I should have this better prepared. I'm sorry, but here's the tweet in response to what happened to that incident earlier with Tom Wilson, where he punched Buchnevich. Okay, here's what the Rangers said. The New York Rangers are extremely disappointed that the Capitals forward Tom Wilson was not suspended for his horrifying act of violence last night at Madison Square Garden. Wilson is a repeat offender with a long history of these type of acts, and we find it shocking that the NHL and their Department of Player Safety failed to take appropriate action and suspend him indefinitely. Wilson's dangerous and reckless actions caused an injury to Artemi Panarin that will prevent him from playing again for the remainder of this season. And this is the phrase that's really going to result in a huge fine of the Rangers organization. We view this as a dereliction of duty by NHL head of player safety George Peros and believe he is unfit to continue in his current role. Wow. You're calling for the head of the player safety to get fired for this. I don't know if I would necessarily have agreed to can him for that, but I do believe that it might very well have warranted it, considering that what the play was very dangerous. Let's talk for a moment about something else happening to the Rangers. The Rangers have missed the playoffs for the fourth straight year. And they have fired President John Davidson. For many of you who follow hockey probably know him from broadcasting with the Rangers back in the day, as well as a national broadcast he used to do. He used to be a goalie for the Rangers many years ago. And he moved up to the executive suite, and he was the president of the organization. And along with general manager Jeff Gorton, they were fired because Jim Dolan, the owner, decided since they missed the playoffs again, heads had to roll. So Associate General Manager Chris Drury has been promoted to President and General Manager effective immediately. Senior Advisor Glenn Sather will work with Drury during this transition and continue to consult with the team. And this is from James Dolan, Executive Chairman of Madison Square Garden Sports. We want to thank JD and Jeff for their contributions to the organization. They are both great hockey professionals who worked hard for the Rangers. However, in order for the team to succeed in the manner our fans deserve, there needs to be a change in leadership. Chris is a very sought-after executive and strong leader, has proven himself to be one of the top young minds in hockey. We are confident he will effectively guide this team to ensure long-term success. We promised Ranger fans. Now, for those of you who probably know, Drury used to play hockey. And for those of you who really go back far enough, he actually won the Little League World Series with Trumbull, Connecticut's team back sometime in the 80s. It was like 89 or something like that, I think. I was in high school at the time when it happened. So he's going to be taking over. Now, the NHL response. Let me go back to to what happened when the NHL responded to what happened. So let's see. They fined him $250,000. And let's see. I'm going to try and find where they said this on their. But to me, it's just one of those crazy things about this whole deal is that the NHL seemed way too defensive about this. Let's see if I can find it. They have a tweet in here from 20 hours ago. Drew McIntyre, great wrestler, not so great at skating. He's got his memoir, Chosen Destiny, out now. Drew McIntyre, the former Raw champion. Raw WWE champion, I should say. Let me get to that statement here, if I can find it. Oh, Lord. But, all right, I may have to go. All right, I'm going to go look at somewhere else, so let's see. But anyhow, it just baffles me that he didn't even get a one-game suspension. I can understand, if it were just the cheap shot that he got, I can understand, if that was all they were reviewing. But it's the thing he did with Panarin. Why the hell would you... I got to find this. All right. And here's the crazy thing. Buchnevich got suspended for a high sticking on Capitals Mantha on the game that had all that big fighting and such, while Buchnevich, who was the guy that was lying prone on the ground, he got suspended for one game for high sticking on one of the other. Here we go. Rangers fined $250,000 for statement ripping the league and Paris. The New York Rangers have been fined. This is Sean O'Leary of The Score. New York Rangers have been fined $250,000 for their statement made in protest of the NHL's decision to not suspend Washington Capitals forward Tom Wilson for his actions on Monday, the league announced on Thursday, quoting, "Public comments of the nature issued by the Rangers were that were personal in nature and demeaning of a league executive will not be tolerated," Commissioner Gary Bettman said, and I'll have more about him in a moment. While we do not expect our clubs to agree with every decision rendered by the Department of Player Safety, the extent to which the Rangers expressed their disagreement was unacceptable. It's terribly unfair to question George Parros' professionalism, dedication to his role, and the Department of Player Safety. New York called for Paris removal as the NHL lead disciplinarian Tuesday and said he's unfit for the position. Additionally, the club called Wilson's actions dangerous and reckless. Head coach David Quinn and several Rangers players also expressed their disappointment in what they viewed as too light of punishment. Wilson has been suspended 5 times in his career, only received a $5,000 fine for punching Pavel Buchnevich while he was in a defenseless position and slamming superstar Artemi Panarin to the ice during Monday's contest. Afterward, Panarin was ruled out for the rest of the season with an injury. Tensions between the two clubs boiled over during their rematch Wednesday as 6 fights occurred in the first period. All right. Now, as you can expect, reaction in New York has been pretty strong to this. Did Wilson deserve the suspension? For what he did to Panarin, absolutely. Buchnevich, I could see giving him a 1-game suspension for that. But the $5,000 fine for either instance, way too lenient. Especially when you consider that the Buchnevich hit, where he's lying on the ice and Wilson's giving him 2 cheap shots, that's way too lenient. Way too lenient. It should have been at least a 1-game suspension, probably more for what that. And then the Panarin incident. That should have been multiple games right there because Panarin's helmet came off and Wilson ragdolled him to the ice, and clearly, at least twice, what I could tell, Panarin's back of his head hit the ice. His head hit the ice. I'm not sure if the first time his back of his head hit the ice. The second time, I think back of his head actually did hit the ice, which is very dangerous indeed, because there's very little protection back in the back of your head, because it's not as much. You do have some protection in the front of your head if you feel there is some protection there. The back of your head doesn't have as much protection because, especially if you're bald-headed, you don't have as much. If you've got a lot of hair, like I currently do, you do have some protection, not much. But if you don't really have that much hair back there, you don't really have that much protection. So that should have been multiple games right there. For both incidents, you could justify multiple games. But the fact that they didn't even give him any at all is baffling. And it really amazes me that he was able to play that night. I mean, because was basically had a target on his back, and he'll probably have a target on his back for some time to come. Now, as for Gary Bettman, I'm not too fond with Mr. Bettman. He's the reason we had the lockout in 94 that almost cost us the 94-95 season. The second lockout that did cost us the 2004-2005 season. And the fact that the NHL, twice when they had a really good chance to really, especially after the 94 year when the Rangers won the Stanley Cup, and they had a lot of mainstream recognition, the lockout came and killed all that goodwill. You got a great contract to the Fox network, and then you killed all of it because you had to try and score points over the players for some reason. You know, you had an opportunity to really, really, really promote your sport, and instead you basically let the owners make it very difficult. Now, in 2004, 2005, that was somewhat more on the players because the economics were not working out, especially with the Canadian teams. There was an opportunity to, and I can understand why they had the lockout that year, but Gary Bettman didn't do himself a whole lot of favors. When you lose an entire season to a lockout, that doesn't do no other professional sports league has had that happen. The NBA is the only one that's come closest to it. The NFL had a couple back in the 80s, which they cost them some games, but they did finish the season and strike shortened seasons in 82 and 87. Baseball had one in 81, and of course they didn't play the World Series in 1994, but at least they had part of the season, and that could go to Bud Selig, who I'm not a fan of either, because, what did you win out of this whole thing? And I can tell you that I don't think baseball's ever recovered from the 94 lockout. Because, or I should say strike, whatever you want to call it, the labor dispute. I don't think baseball's ever recovered from that. And I don't think it ever will, in my honest opinion. When you're a sport like hockey, and you lose an entire season, that gives fans an excuse, casual fans an excuse, to leave to go watch something else. You don't want that to happen, because that means you almost certainly will never get them back. The hardcore fans will stick around. People like myself, who were at one time rather somewhat hardcore but kind of more casual now, my interest in hockey has kind of waned somewhat, because and on top of the lockout, they made a very bad business decision in going with NBC and OLN at the time, which later became NBCSN. And instead of just sticking with ESPN, which gave them a better platform for hockey. Now, I can understand why, because the NHL went from ESPN, which only gave them a small amount of coverage compared to the NBA and, of course, Major League Baseball and the NFL and college sports. NBCSN only had the NHL at the time and the Premier League, which now they won't even have, because by the end of this year, NBCSN is going to be gone, which means the Premier League will be on Peacock. It'll be on USA for some certain games, I'm sure, which will boost them. But here's the interesting thing. Now, USA is not going to have hockey because the NHL decided to go with ESPN as their primary carrier. Now, there's a secondary contract up that NBC could have gotten, but they chose not to. That went to, strangely enough, Turner Sports. So you're going to see the NHL on TNT. This could be very good for the NHL. And Gary Bettman doesn't usually do this well, but apparently he did so this time. You're back at a network, ESPN, that really has a lot of people that love hockey. Linda Cohn, Steve Levy, John Butchergross, a bunch of others who really could really bolster your NHL coverage. You could probably get some people back, by like maybe Bill Pito, who was great on NHL Tonight back in the day. You get Barry Melrose back in his analyst position. He's still been there, but you got all these great people there, and you have the pieces there to really make it great. You can bring it back. Gary Thorne as your lead announcer if he's up for doing that. Of course, Gary Thorne's getting up there in years. I think he does a limited schedule of Baltimore Orioles games these days, but it'd be nice to have him do some NHL games again, because to me he's the second best American hockey announcer behind Doc Emmerich. Steve Levy, I'm almost surely, will be the more or less the primary voice of it. If Gary Thorne decides not to do it, or he decides not to be the lead announcer for the NHL coverage on there. And here's another thing, he might decide he might get a better deal out of Turner, and that gives you Steve Levy as the lead announcer for ESPN, Gary Thorne as the lead announcer for Turner Sports. That is a huge, huge, huge deal. And I definitely could see that happening. with that deal. But to me, I really think you're going to see the NHL doing very well with this deal, especially if they follow the inside the NBA format for their pre-game and post-game shows. Whew. Excuse me. That kind of caught me by surprise, that yawn. Quickly now, LeBron James's Lakers are struggling right now. He's banged up. Anthony Davis is banged up. I really think this could be LeBron James's last season. He said something the other day, which he basically said he doesn't think he'll ever be back at 100%. That was very, very troubling because, to me, it's the first admission that LeBron James has ever given that he's not ever going to be back to where he once was. I mean, he's been in the league for 18 years now, something like that, 17, 18 years. But he's a man in his mid-30s who's played an awful lot of basketball and who is, in my opinion, the third best player ever to play the game, behind Kobe and Michael Jordan being number one, of course. It really depends on how he finishes the season up. I think the Lakers will not win the NBA title. I don't think they're going to even come close. I think Utah is the better team right now. I really think that this play-in could be their undoing. And I think this is going to be a situation where LeBron decides, do I want to keep doing this? Do I have the desire to do it anymore? Do I want to put my body through an 82-game season next year when everything's back to normal for the most part? Do I want to put my body through that? That's a very big question. I think the odds of him retiring after this year are actually really good right now. Whether or not he decides to do that remains to be seen. This is his third year in Los Angeles with the Lakers. I could see him stepping away, perhaps, and retiring, though he could decide to go ahead and announce that next year will be his last season, and then he'll step away from the game after that. That remains to be seen. I really don't know. But I think that's pretty much it for him. Baseball, Albert Pujols has been sent down to the minors or designated for assignment's the term by the Angels. I would assume this is the end for him, unless somebody picks him up and in a limited role. It'd probably be most likely an American League team, unless the Cardinals sign him, and then that would be for like a day, and he'll retire as a Cardinal. He had a great career with the Cardinals, and then of course he left for the big money with the Angels. It never turned out quite the way he hoped for, especially with Mike Trout. They never were able to surround him and Mike Trout with the kind of talent to really push that team to where it needs to go. So he's in the final year of his contract, I believe. It was just time. The Angels were not. He was not really giving them what they wanted, and I think this is not really coming as much of a surprise, in all honesty. But it's a sad statement of affairs when it doesn't seem all that long ago, even though it's been 20 years, he made his debut and had a fantastic rookie season for the Cardinals. And he became the legend that he is. And he'll certainly be in the Hall of Fame. I would dare say first ballot. So he is going to definitely be in the Hall of Fame. And the question is, did he make the mistake that Ken Griffey Jr. made of leaving a place where he was really, really popular and really doing well? Griffey had a great career going in Seattle. He then signed with Cincinnati, and it never turned out quite as well for him after that. Bounced around a couple more teams after that, then he retired. Now you've got Pujols. Excuse me. I'm going to have to wrap this up soon. Pujols left to go from St. Louis to go to California to the Angels for a big amount of money. But his career never quite was the same after that. And you could argue the same thing to a degree with A-Rod. He left Seattle for Texas. Didn't quite pan out as well there. He then moved on to the Yankees. He won a World Series there, but it never quite panned out the way that they expected. And then, of course, there was a whole controversy about PEDs and all of that, and his career essentially ended to the point where I don't know if he'll ever get in the Hall of Fame. And now he's broke up with J-Lo. Finally, let me touch on the Aaron Rodgers thing before I let you go. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers has pretty much said he's not planning on coming back to the Packers. The Packers have said that they will not trade him. And I was surprised that last week that they didn't actually trade him to get some draft picks out of him. He's not going to play another game for the Packers, in my opinion. I think he's going to sit out this year, take losing that money, and just say, I'm tired of this. Terry Bradshaw, the old coot that he is, said the other day that Rodgers is being weak. I don't think so. I think that Terry was speaking from a person that hasn't played football in nearly 40 years competitively. You know, it was a much different game back then. Players have a lot more power over their fate and all that. Players are more aware of their value than they were back then. And Aaron Rodgers knows he's still got some time left. And it all goes back to that draft from last year when Jordan Love was picked. And Aaron Rodgers wasn't even told about it before it happened. And that's bugged him a lot. And their GM really needs to make a decision. You either admit picking Jordan Love was a mistake, which would of course mean that getting rid of Jordan Love would be a lot harder because that would drive down the price you could get for Jordan Love. Or do you trade Aaron Rodgers for picks and players and you get something out of him? The big date to look at is June 1st. That's when I think the league year starts again, and the hit that the Packers would take for trading Rodgers or cutting him would be greatly lessened on their salary cap. So definitely Aaron Rodgers leaving is going to happen. I don't think he's ever going to play another game for the Packers. And if he does, it is not going to be a situation where it's going to be pleasant. It will be a very ugly year, I think. The best solution, in my opinion, is after June the 1st, you trade him to another team. You get something for him. You give Jordan Love the keys to the car and say, okay, here's your shot, kid. We're going to rebuild. We're going to see what you got. We're going to put these tools behind you, and we're going to give you the best opportunity to see what you've got. The truth of the matter is, I don't know if that's going to happen because the Packers look like they're going to stand firm on this, and there comes a point where really you're not going to win this battle. I don't think the Packers are going to win this battle. Aaron Rodgers is the kind of person, from the fact that he's basically ghosted his entire family because his family, and he had some issues, and he basically doesn't even talk to his family anymore. So yeah, Aaron Rodgers pretty much is done as a Packer. It's only a matter of what happens to him next year. Do they trade him? Do they release him? Do they force him to sit out the entire year? That remains to be seen. I think the Packers will eventually do the right thing for the organization and for Rodgers. They'll trade him, get something for him, and address some needs and give Jordan Love the opportunity to see if he's actually the future as the GM thought he was. If it blows up in their face, the GM's going to lose his job, and the Packers are going to be hurting for some time to come. So, yeah. It is not fun being in Packerland right now, I'm sure, for those fans up there. That's it. That's all I need to talk about today. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. I turn 50 tomorrow, so I don't know if I'll do another podcast tomorrow or if I'll do one on Sunday. But we will be talking about that. Great many things on my not just this podcast, but my other podcast as well, the John Thomas Hill Show. So thank you for tuning in to this. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a great weekend ahead. And that's it for now. Bye-bye.